so didn't have anyone sign up for my college coaching schedule this afternoon, and I have about an hour before I have to teach a class. A little sleepy, but I have some tea, so I figured let's do a round analysis. I know what you're thinking. What is that thing on the wall? And the answer is I don't know. It was there when I moved in. I think some sort of homemade exercise equipment that's screwed into the wall. Um, yeah, this was around somebody suggested. Let's check it out. I got like an hour. It's a 54-minute video, which, given that I tend to pause and talk for like 15 minutes, would mean that I won't get to finish, but I think it has RFDs in there, and if the RFDs are long, I don't know how long a PF round is, everything added up, especially with how long these kids spend getting evidence to show. Dun, da, dun, da. I think I just did that song from in Rocky, where the guys with the oil barrel. Okay. Let's see. Lake Highland KS versus Nueva TR. I don't know Nueva, but it's a name I've heard a lot. I think I might know somebody who used to coach there or something, or they're just local. Not sure. Not hearing anything yet. Okay, we're good.
We negate the resolution, and our first contention is poverty reduction. America's means-tested welfare system is designed to funnel benefits to the least fortunate. As a result, Oxfam Columbia in 2013 finds that welfare programs have reduced the national poverty levels by 40%, affirming and replacing means-tested welfare with universal basic income.
Oh, this is UBI. I thought it was. I thought it was going to be healthcare. That's fine. I know the UBI topic pretty well, I think. Why does it do that?
By replacing targeted benefits. Jahar of the Benson Institute in 2019 explained that welfare programs are uniquely designed to aid the poor, providing targeted assistance for food, housing, and medical care. Replacing these development programs with a monthly check will be far less effective. Erzad Forbes in 2019 explains that 11 million American adults lack basic literacy skills. And without the guidance of the current welfare programs, many recipients wouldn't use their dividends effectively. Second is by diluting funding.
That's an okay argument. I mean, it's a little, nothing against this child specifically, right? But it's a little bit like paternalistic white male, like, oh, the minorities and the poor wouldn't even know what to do with their money if we gave it to them, which I think has been pretty demonstrably proven. It's been demonstrated to be false, right? I mean, they've done pilot programs with UBI, and the response that you ought to make to something like this is that the links have been tested. What we mean by that is, look, we've tried doing this thing either in another place or in a different time, and we know what the outcomes are. In other words, we know whether we link into this argument or not, or we know whether you link into the argument or not. And I would say in this case that the links have been tested. People didn't mismanage their money when they were given UBI in, say, like Stockton. The other thing is that one of the arguments that Paul, we did like a little, we did a tournament, an online tournament that we still need to make a video about and post the rounds for. But we actually researched this and competed in it, and I wrote most of the Aff, and Paul wrote most of the Neg, or I don't really remember. No, I think I wrote both cases and he wrote blocks. Whatever. The point is that one of the arguments that Paul had, which is just a no-brainer argument on this topic that no one we hit had an answer to, and somehow we lost 3 rounds, is that UBI is permanent, but welfare, you only have it for a limited amount of time. You can only be on food stamps, or I'm not sure about food stamps, but certainly you can only be on unemployment or like welfare for like a limited number of, like a limited amount of time before you're taken off. They passed those laws in the 90s, I think. So like to say that means tested or welfare is better or whatever in these niche instances is kind of useless when the other side can say, yeah, but then it runs out, which I hope the negative mentions here, but I don't know how common that argument was, but it's a well-known thing. I mean, maybe not a lot of kids doing PF know very many people on welfare or food stamps or unemployment. I hate when the spacebar doesn't work. What's the problem, bro?
Larger benefits can be afforded. Tanner the Cato Institute, 2013, writes that the median value of a welfare package is around $28,000 a year. A UBI would transfer resources away from those who need it into the hands of those who need it less, as even the most ambitious UBI plans of $12,000 a year would still cut the average welfare recipient's income by more than half. Third, by disregarding families. Means tested welfare.
That part I need an explanation for, like, that link, right? Like, oh, I guess the rest says replace. All right. Okay, word.
Programs are structured to give more generous benefits to single mother households, as they have greater financial need than single individuals. Bradford, the Institute of Family Studies in 2018 confirms that children living with single mothers are 5 times more likely to be impoverished. Because of this, Goldman and the Pollier Institute in 2016 finds that single mother households receive up to $40,000 in welfare benefits. By contrast, a UBI definitionally excludes individuals until they are adults, essentially treating a single mother with 3 children as one person. Because of this, Montague John Hopkins in 2018 finds that even the most generous UBI plans, a single parent would still lose up to $19,000 in annual benefits. Without enough money to access a proper education or even the most basic necessities, these children will be trapped in a cycle of impoverishment with no.
Does a UBI define, like, not define children? What's the source on that? Did he have a source on that? I'm not sure that that's the case. Well, let's see if the neg mentions that.
Chance of upward mobility. For these 3 reasons, Roberts of the CVP in 2017 concludes that under any UBI,
I also think it's really misleading when public forum debaters say, for these 3 reasons, so-and-so concludes. It's like, okay, so-and-so concludes that, but is it for those 3 reasons? Like, is that in the card? I don't know. Reason 1000 why paraphrasing is probably not good, and not allowing paraphrasing would, I don't know. I started making a video, started writing, like, the outline for a video once on, like, what a dumpster fire of a event public forum is, just from a design standpoint, just how it was designed, why it was designed that way, and why it's like a really horrible format of debate for a competitive event, which was never meant to be. But it literally was like too many things, and the video would be like 3 hours long. But anyway, yeah, I feel like that's misleading. If your author isn't literally citing those reasons, you don't get to say it's for those reasons. But I guess I have to call the card to know if that's true.
Millions of the poor would end up significantly worse off. And the Roundtree Foundation in 2018 furthers that a UBI would increase child poverty by 60%. Critically, Zeller of the Huffington Post in 2012 finds that low-income Americans get trapped into intergenerational cycles of impoverishment. And a 2016 Columbia University study found that poverty causes more death than any other leading cause of death in America.
In the status quo, bro. Like, yeah, poverty is bad, but you're reading impacts to why poverty in the status quo is really bad, which is probably going to make a try or die for the Aff to improve it. Oh my god, my mic has not been plugged in. Are you hearing me at all? Or is it... Oh my god. I guess I should have tested this. I'm going to work off the assumption that you did hear all of that in crystal clarity.
Our second contention is a chopping block. Financing
is what?
Any other leading cause of death in America. Our second contention is a chopping block. Financing
chopping block
would be incredibly costly. Director of the New York Post in 2018 reports that in a single year, a UBI of $12,000 per person would cost $3.8 trillion. And cutting existing means-tested programs would only cover 1/5 of the cost. Importantly, Greenstein and the CVP in 2019 explained that financing a UBI primarily through tax increases would be politically impossible, requiring Americans to accept a level of taxation vastly exceeding anything in history. And the World Economic Forum in 2019 finds that a permanent UBI couldn't be debt financed. Thus, the only politically viable way to fund a UBI would be to cut from other forms of government spending. Problematically, foreign aid would be the first to get cut. This is because, according to Rego Radius in 2017, foreign aid is a single program in the budget that the majority of Americans want to cut, with 60% demanding significant cuts. This is especially likely given that affirming less welfare spending, because Lancaster for the Center of Global Development in 2007 finds that when Americans see domestic spending being cut, support for foreign aid significantly decreases, because foreign aid is seen as trading off available resources.
Look, UBI is a thing that has been proposed, and not one proposal proposes to cut what you're talking about as funding. So no, just because something is unpopular doesn't mean that they don't cut things in the budget based on like the popularity of that thing. But even if it did, I don't know. I feel like the we can't afford it argument is kind of a waste. I mean, it's pretty well trodden ground, right? Like, we can't afford it. Yeah, we can if we do this, this, and that, and have the value-added tax and have the whatever, right? At the end of the day, I'm just going to assume that the economists proposing UBI have taken into consideration whether it's possible, right? Like, why 12,000? Why not just go, like, give everybody $50,000 a year if, like, they weren't thinking about the number? Like, I'm going to just go ahead and assume that somebody who's really good at math and knows the figures has done that math. And I think it would take very compelling and very specific evidence to persuade me otherwise, other than just some guy saying it's too expensive. I don't know, man. You can cut 100 cards of people saying it's too expensive. You can cut 100 cards of people saying it's not expensive because it saves money ultimately, because then you don't have to spend the money on healthcare or whatever because people take better care of themselves, and so on and so forth. It's just not that strong. It's not that creative. I'm sure everybody has a million blocks to it, and I don't imagine a lot of neg teams, because the negative can go first in public forum. I don't imagine a lot of these teams are like winning on that argument. So, like, why bother?
Rant of Stanford University in 2013 finds that foreign aid has empirically been the first thing on the chopping block in tough budgetary times. Critically, left study Xavier University in 2017 finds that since its inception, American aid has...
I'm talking about foreign aid. Isn't that non-unique? Like, isn't Trump cutting foreign aid anyway? Yeah, you need a uniqueness argument here that says why foreign aid in the status quo is good and trending in a positive way. Otherwise, a team that knows what an advantage is and knows what uniqueness is could pretty easily read a non-unique argument. I mean, I guess it won't be carded, and you're not going to disclose your case, so they're not going to have evidence. But in an imaginary world where your arguments didn't rely on... Let me just the quick point real quick. Like, if you're in an evidentiary format of debate, you need to give your opponents an opportunity to cut cards in answer to your evidence or to examine your evidence. And that can't be calling cards at the end of the round, because no tournament is going to allow that or encourage it. And it shouldn't be like the main enforcement mechanism for every single round, right? Like, it's not, oh, like, I prepared this and you shouldn't get to steal my prep because I did the work and you didn't. Like, the work's not done until we know you're not just fucking lying. So, anyway, imagining someone could cut, like, a card in answer to this, or that they could just come up with an analytic on the spot and not have it hand-waved because it didn't have a card. Yeah, this seems pretty non-unique, or at least it seems that the non-unique answer would be an easy response. I wouldn't have gone with foreign aid in a time where we're, like, abandoning the Kurds. Like, what foreign aid are we, like, bombing Yemen? Is that our foreign aid right now? Like, what are we actually doing?
Provided over 40% of the global population with food and funds, lifting tens of millions of people out of extreme poverty every single year. Budget cuts would thus be catastrophic for the global poor, as Burma, the University of Nottingham in 2003 quantifies that every 10% decrease in U.S. aid reduces the Human Development Index by 3%, a measure of livelihood that analyzes education, health, and income of the poor. Critically, the
It seems kind of silly to say don't go for poverty in a UBI topic, but don't go for poverty on every argument. Because, well, first of all, they're going to go for poverty, in their case, really hard. And that's going to make it a really big, at best, wash, right? But it's going to be really hard for any of you to win a really clean poverty impact. So what's probably going to happen is the AF is going to go for poverty and something like healthcare. And if you just have poverty, then, you know, you don't really have a unique angle in the debate. And you're kind of behind the impact game because you're trying really hard to win link differentials, trying hard to show that your poverty impacts happen, but their poverty impacts don't. Like, you don't need to tell me why poverty is important. The AF is running UBI. Like, they're not going to come up and say poverty doesn't matter. Right? Like, I saw this post on Reddit with an impact card for war with China for the no first use topic, which, like, both sides are going to agree that a war with China would be bad in a nuclear weapon topic. Like, do you need, like, a super strong impact that says why it would be? Like, what are people going to weigh against that? Anyway, I'm sure I'm running out of time. All right, let's keep going. We're 4 minutes in. How long has this video been? Half hour? I don't know.
IMVA concludes that poverty is the root cause of death in the developing world.
Yeah, it's your whole case is you have two poverty impacts, domestic and global. I think that's all right. It's just not very strategic. Really slow evidence sharing. Why don't you have this ready to share? Just send them to them before the round. Send them a file that has the speech, and at the bottom has the cut cards. Why, how could that possibly hurt you unless you are lying? Or your evidence is bad. Oh my god. Great. Cool. Sir.
Everyone ready?
Yeah.
Nueva affirms our first contention is repairing the broken welfare system. Recessive welfare is failing right now as despite implementing 79 recessive welfare programs and spending nearly $1 trillion a year on said programs, 2018 compliance and poverty rate has largely hovered at 10% over the past 50 years. More specifically, current... So
this is a good strategy, right? You want to say that the status quo was bad because you're advocating for a change. That sets you up for the try or die. So, so this is pretty good, saying that it's not like accomplishing its goal, but what you want to do in addition to that is you want to talk about how it's kind of on the chopping block, like Trump might try to get rid of it or defund it or something. What you could also do is mention that, like, people are only on it for a limited amount of time, all to kind of just show that the status quo is bad. This lowers the threshold for how guaranteed a return, like how guaranteed a result you need from trying the AF. Because if the status quo is already the worst case scenario, then what's the harm in trying? Let's see how well that gets framed.
Recessive welfare programs are failing in two ways. First, by disincentivizing work. Unfortunately, most recessive welfare programs struggle from an employment trap, where individuals with the poverty line are disincentivized from working so as to keep the welfare benefits. Indeed, 10 out of 15 of the Cato Institute finds that the welfare pays more than the minimum wage job in 35 states. Simply put, workers are turning away from more prosperous employment as they see that upgrading their job can sacrifice their welfare and leave them completely vulnerable. What
is your statistic for that? Like, you said that is that plane super loud? You say that the welfare is more than minimum wage, but I don't know if I caught a specific analysis that said there was a significant number of people choosing welfare over minimum wage work. I also don't know why that's bad. Like, I especially don't know why that's bad if the work they would be doing pays less than the welfare. Like, how is it a poverty trap if it's paying more than the work you would be doing otherwise?
That perverse incentive, allowing families to escape the trap of poverty and climb the socioeconomic ladder. These effects are historically proven, as Schneider 17 of USA Today explains that after families were kicked off welfare, they saw their income double in 1 year and triple in 4 years. Second, by wasting valuable funds. Welfare puts a dangerous amount of power and funding into the hands of an overly bureaucratic welfare system, which results in billions of lost dollars of funding for America's poorest. Indeed, 1019 of Cato finds the current system of welfare gives total power to individual states to decide how and where to spend their money, creating a nightmare of unaccountability where every state has different rules and restrictions. And this
So I think they're going really hard for welfare bad, which is kind of like, it's kind of strategic, right? Because it's maybe not what the negative is expecting, and if you can prove welfare is bad, then that's reason enough to pass the plan, because regardless of the UBI, you're taking out the welfare aspect. But and we had plenty of welfare bad arguments in our case. I'll just put the case in the link. You can compare what they're running to what we prepared. But you don't want to go... You want to make sure you don't relink into these... I know it's not a DA, right? But, like, you don't want to relink into the same problem, right? So you want to be more specific as to, like, why welfare is causing these problems, so that you can win a more clean link to UBI doesn't disincentivize work, UBI doesn't make people whatever, right? Let's see how that is handled.
Dollars are squandered, as Val's 15, the Center for American Progress finds that in TAMP, one of the largest immune-sensitive programs for families in poverty, only 25% of funds go towards actually helping those people. In other words, 75% of the $16 billion we spent on this program is wasted.
What? Okay. Why is it wasted? Right? Like, a non-profit that sends food to, I don't know, some country, right, is only going to get some percent of that, of their money spent on actually getting food. But the other, let's say 75%, isn't necessarily wasted. It might be inherent to getting food there at all. Administrative costs, facilities, other things, like, those are necessary. And what is the link differential with UBI? Like, well, one of the cleaner wins is, like, because UBI is universal, you don't have to have all of these, like, application and screening processes to, you know, see whether the means testing itself basically is a waste of resources. But I don't know, like, let's see.
Unfortunately, the UBI would put money directly in the hands of those who need it. As Columbina 19 of the University of Turin quantifies, that because the UBI is as simple as writing a check, the administrative cost of UBI could be 5 times smaller than immune-sensitive welfare. Overall, the impact of these flaws in our welfare system is millions in poverty. J19, the Washington Post, quantifies that more than 25% of people living in poverty who are eligible for benefits fail to receive them. Our second contention is rekindling economic growth. A UBI would have a tremendous positive impact on U.S. growth, as it puts hard cash in the hands of those who would spend it and stimulate the entire economy. Matthew 17 of Vox warns that the economy generally tends to slow down and struggle when the middle and lower class aren't earning enough to spend and stimulate businesses to produce goods and services. Fortunately, a UBI would give individuals money to spend productively, bolstering the economy. Matthew continues that as the poor and middle class begin to receive their UBI, $2.5 trillion of spending would enter the economy by 2025. The overall result of the UBI would be massive U.S. growth. Zesa 17, the Roosevelt Institute, quantifies that an annual UBI of $1,000 would increase economic growth by a staggering 12.56% over the next 8 years. The impact of economic growth is alleviating poverty. As the American economy grows, so do the job opportunities, wages, and standard of living of millions of citizens. Ferrara 14 of Forbes finds that the economic growth of the last century has decreased child mortality by 95%, and that the living standards of America's poorest have doubled. That's why Ferrara concludes the economic growth should be viewed as the ultimate solution to poverty. But economic growth also allows businesses to produce more and hire more workers, alleviating poverty via employment, which is why Matthews adds that the economic effects of the UBI stimulating demand will lead to the overall creation of 4.7 million jobs. The impact is also scalar, as Burton 11 continues that every 1% increase in GDP creates 1 million jobs. Importantly, Injawadi 16 finds that jobs are the surest and fastest way out of poverty, because even if welfare makes sure people have enough food to eat, jobs ensure that people leave poverty and continue climbing the socioeconomic ladder, because job experience leads to better jobs. At the end of the day, you're going to be affirming.
What? I don't know, man. I think this debate, again, all very talented people, very talented debaters. I'm not seeing the strategy. It just seems like they just researched it and then picked a couple cards. Like, the only thing that isn't super, like, cookie cutter milquetoast argument is the foreign aid one, but that has a really iffy link, and even then it's still just a different poverty impact. I don't know. I think this line of thinking that I have, it comes a lot from Parley, because in Parley you do rounds over and over and over again, different topics all the time, and really you just kind of see the types of arguments, and you think about the, like, impacts more than you think about, like, the specific links for that topic, or, like, the specific research, right? Like, the research and all of that is there to dictate which of the potential arguments you go for and how you go for them, but you shouldn't pick your strategy based on, like, the first 5 Google results, right? It's not like, oh, let me read some article about why UBI is good and they list 3 reasons and those are going to be in my case. What you should be thinking about, we have we have a video on this where we talk about writing your arguments from the bottom up. Like, at the end of the day, what do I want to be advocating for? What do I want to be running? And then you just try to think of which of those arguments fit this topic, which of them have clear links, and that will, 1, make it way less likely that your opponent has blocks, but 2, make the impact comparison game a lot easier. I see public forum debaters complain all the time that judges made their decision on some arbitrary thing, but, like, yeah, when you're going into a round and you're just saying, Jimmy Smith says the economy will go up, and then the other side's like, oh, that's not what John Johnson says the economy will do, and then you just kind of, like, disagree with each other for 4 speeches, and then the judge is somehow supposed to, like, reconcile that difference without actually carded evidence, just you're paraphrasing. Like, it's a lot of work for a judge, and judges always take the easiest out. If you're bad at cross-ex and the other side isn't, and every other decision is, like, a complicated process to decide, that's how you're going to lose for being bad at cross-ex. Or, like, if you just didn't respond to something that you don't think is important, whatever, you don't give the judges, 1, you want the judge's easy outs to be working in your favor, but 2, just don't put the judge in a position where they have to make a complicated decision. Like, how is there going to be a collapse later in this debate, right? Everyone's running the same impact with just different links. This is just a, like, methods debate at this point, right? By which I mean we agree on what the outcome we want is: higher employment, better economy, less poverty. It's just a question of what is more effective to help us reach that, the status quo or UBI. And public forum isn't particularly well suited for, like, that in-depth a level of, like, card and link analysis. It's not an LD, it's not a policy, right? It's built more for, like, the type of argument you're running and the type of impact you're running, helping you, rather than this specific, like, carded link analysis. Especially since I don't know these competitors. A lot of people aren't cutting their own cards, so you probably aren't even able to answer the finer details that would give your research methods a preference over your opponents. So what's the strategy, right? Like, you're forcing it to come down to this level of minutia, but you're also not familiar with that level of minutia. So the judge ends up making wacky decisions because you made the debate hard. Okay, let me check the time. Yikes. Okay, I don't know. I got, like, I got another half hour.
25%.
Oh, that's of one program, right? So I'm talking about the entire welfare.
So
spectrum
one,
of the
our,
United
yeah,
States.
so first, our balance evidence, I said it's one welfare program, so you use 25% of the overall administrative cost. Okay, this is like a three-part answer. This is important because your third argument about single mothers is dependent on this program, so let's put off this rust. But third and more importantly, the Columbino evidence does a comparative and tells you that UBI is 5 times smaller administrative costs than any welfare program, which means that UBI is always a profitable solution to welfare, even if welfare isn't that
The
inefficient.
reason you're avoiding my question is because there's extremely small amount of bureaucracy that occurs. Right? The only evidence you give is 25% of a
Child on the left, that's not a question. I don't understand why people in public forum don't call each other out on this more often. That's not a question. You ask a question, you get an answer. If you asked a question where they managed to just say something that was in no way a useful answer to you, then you should have asked a better question. But I don't see why in cross-examination, I guess it's crossfire technically, but still, I don't see why someone gets to be like, here is an argument that isn't even related to what you mentioned. And I also don't see what the benefit of it is because it's not getting on the flow.
single program. There's still tons of other programs that don't have a ton of bureaucracy, which is why there's only a few $1 billion lost to bureaucracy each year. The budget for welfare is hundreds of billions of dollars. So I'm confused what your terminal impact is. If only a very
Yeah, and then they like try to tack on a question at the end, like,
Three ways. One, UBI will always be competitively better than the current welfare system. Two, and more importantly, we actually give you the evidence from specific programs that tells you 25% of the rural funds are wasted. Kind of a question. Sorry, 75% of funds are wasted. Kind of a question.
Yes.
Let's talk about your third argument about family. The first argument tells you that need-sensitive welfare gives more money to single mother households. But then the second part tells you that children living with single mothers are 5 times more likely to be in poverty. Doesn't that just prove welfare is not working the status quo?
No, it
Insofar as
doesn't.
people who get welfare are still in poverty.
No. The card that's saying that 5 times more likely to be in poverty is not like with welfare. It's that like because there's a greater financial burden because they have children. That's why they receive more benefits.
No, the way
under UBI.
no, it says they're in poverty.
Okay, so how many children are in poverty that aren't on need-sensitive welfare?
How many children are in poverty that are on these?
Because you said your evidence is comparing the number of people in poverty, not in welfare, to the number of people in poverty in welfare.
You can phrase this question a lot more effectively. Like, are the children on welfare in poverty?
I mean, yeah, our evidence says 25% of people in poverty aren't on welfare in the first place. So obviously you get two
What is your
factors.
evidence?
25% of people in poverty aren't on
Yeah, and we're obviously going to contest that. We're going to say that there are.
Yes, I'm asking you, why are you contesting? You're saying I'm contesting it. You have to give me a reason as to why you should contest it.
I mean, why we're contesting it?
It's like, what's wrong about our argument that makes your argument preferable?
Yeah,
Why
we
should
have,
we win?
we have evidence that indicates from the United States Census that 50 million people are getting benefits from being stressed
So
welfare.
how does that contradict all the fact that 25% of Americans
It
who are
doesn't.
in poverty?
It's just disagreement in statistics.
How does that disagree? You just said that.
Because you're saying
Question.
people aren't getting it, I'm saying people are getting it. That's a disagreement.
No. That's not what he's saying. And I think Nueva child can be phrasing this a lot clearer. Like, look, I'm not disagreeing about who's getting it or not, but I want to just understand, like, are children on welfare still in poverty, or is the welfare getting them out of poverty? Obviously, it's not.
Can I have a question?
Yeah.
Okay, so on your argument about like you're saying
Which also, like, okay, let's assume that the kid on the left understands that question. Just answer the question, right? Like, that wasn't like a very like slick dodge, right? Like, they're gonna make that argument anyway. There's no answer that you can give that will, especially like a dodgy answer that will make your opponent be like, I guess I won't bring this up in my speech. So the damage is going to be done anyway. Just say, yeah, they're in poverty. And then you have, all the rest of the debate to say that even if they are still in poverty, UBI doesn't solve any better, or it just makes things worse.
So, can you explain like how consumption factors into
Consumption.
Yeah.
So argument is about consumer spending in the United States. So with the UBI, people also have $12,000 more income. They can use more disposably, so they can like buy goods and services.
Also, like, can you explain how consumption factors in? Like, it's just not a very strong cross-ex question, right? Like, can you explain blank? If you really need them to explain an argument to you and you have no real other way of engaging with it, then I guess you got to ask it, right? We have a video on asking effective questions, but like it's like if you need clarification, get your clarification. But otherwise, like, what are you doing? You're just mentioning consumption so that what he can make his answer, and then you're like, actually, consumption does this. It's just the whole point of cross-examination is to get your opponent to say things on the record that you can use against them. If all you're going to do is disagree with their answer, then what was the point of asking the question? Just make the argument in the next speech in response to their case. You're not getting ahead of the discussion. And you're not even framing yourself as being like, oh, I know more about this topic or whatever, because you're just giving them an open platform to talk about their side of the debate in whatever way they want. Like, how does your argument work, or how does this factor in, isn't like a terribly gotcha question where they're going to be like, oh, wow, yeah, I don't know. They're just going to get to elaborate on their case more. I don't think it really helps you look better. Anyway.
This is overall increases investor confidence and just gives people raw cash.
Let's start the timer. Okay, 1:37. How long until the speech?
Is everyone ready?
That wasn't so bad.
On their first convention about fixing welfare, they told that the poverty rate has remained at 10%. That's because their measurements of poverty are bad. They don't take into account spending on education, housing, and healthcare that welfare gives them, which is why even though it seems like they're under the poverty line, they're actually far more above. Then on their first morning.
It seems like they're under the poverty line, but actually their schools are well funded, so they're far above the poverty line? That's not... Also, like, do you have a car? Does any expert consider you not to be in poverty because you have benefits? Like, that's... Yeah, I don't know. That seems... I don't know if not in poverty is the framing that you wanted to go for there. I think, like, quality of life might have been a better framing.
Lots of responses here. First is that the FGA finds that fewer than 1% of able-bodied adults on means-tested welfare, slightly more than 250,000 adults nationally, are within even 10 percentage points of this eligibility limit, which will cut off their income. Many of these individuals are a safe distance away from it. Second, the FGA furthers that major welfare programs provide off-ramps or transitional benefits for income changes, which is why enrollees double their incomes after leaving welfare, and Rector of Johns Hopkins confirms that under welfare, for every dollar of earnings, there'll be a net gain of 83 cents. There's not a disincentive. Third, Goldman, the Center for Law and Social Policy, finds that welfare programs have been updated to improve work incentives, which is why research overwhelmingly indicates the safety net as a whole supports work, especially for low-income parents, and that any work barriers are much smaller than welfare's work-promoting effects. Finally, it's still on a good thing, because Hamilton of the VHS explains that welfare was reformed to deal with their arguments. The government provides education, employment, and support services to push them into the workforce, which is why Fox and Columbia finds that welfare has decreased poverty by 4%. Then, on the second board about bureaucracy, there's a lot of problems here. First, only a few billion out of trillions of dollars we spend on welfare is lost to bureaucratic costs. We know this corruption doesn't matter because, again, Fox Columbia finds that welfare programs have reduced national poverty levels by 40%. Second, in reality, people do get access to welfare. Rector Johns Hopkins explains that the actual take-up rate of EITC, Medicaid, SNAP, and free school lunches is over 100%, so the people that need access are getting it, and the U.S. Census finds that 50 million people have access to welfare. There's only 40 million people that are in poverty. It definitely affects enough people. Finally, even if slightly more people get benefits in their world, it comes at the cost of the rest of the poor losing all their upwards mobility. You're taking their benefits from $20,000 to $12,000, leaving them on net way worse off. Finally, their impact is that 25% of people in poverty don't have access to welfare. This evidence is A, about undocumented immigrants who a UBI wouldn't help, and B, people at risk of short-term poverty. Welfare targets people at risk of intergenerational poverty with a much better link in, and it's much stronger also.
These arguments are pretty good, but they're a little bit roundabout and, like, squirrely, right? Like, the Aff has a card that says, hey, a bunch of people who qualify for, would qualify for benefits aren't getting them. And the Neg is reading, like, yes, they are getting them, which, like, now as a judge, like, what am I supposed to do with that? But also, the argument that, like, no, poor people get welfare because there's only 40 million people and 50 million people are eligible for welfare. Like, that doesn't, one, mean that they're getting it, and two, it doesn't mean that the 50 million people who are eligible are encompassing of the 40 million people who are in poverty, even though it seems like it should be. But most importantly, which no one has brought up and should be the only argument people are reading, not the only argument, but it should be like the start and end of every Aff speech in this debate, means test of welfare is temporary. We're talking about kids in poverty, right? Like, is a kid in poverty better off, like, having, like, income assistance to their family for their entire lives, or like 3 years? Probably their entire lives. It seems like a pretty big thing that, I don't know, I guess none of the big briefs included that, so nobody thought about it, but it just seems like the no-brainer, most important argument. But all in all, pretty good, but the answers aren't really that direct, right? They don't have, like, I have an like, one card that just straight up says people are receiving benefits. It's a little bit more extrapolaty than that, and is getting like, well, I have 50 million people are eligible and only 40 million people are in poverty, so I extrapolate that that means that nobody is left wanting, which, I don't know, like, seems like it would be pretty easy for the Aff to be like, this many people are dying. In fact, the Neg said this many people are dying from poverty in the United States. I don't understand. Hopefully the Aff goes for that pretty hard, because that's what the cross-ex question was insinuating. Like, if welfare solves, why is poverty so harmful in the status quo?
Let's go to the second tension, but consumption. Lots of problems here. They say there's not enough consumption or spending in the economy right now, but Deloitte in July finds the economy actually has really strong consumer demand. The problem is weak business demand, but business demand won't increase because of general economic fears. They don't change business demand. Second, there will be no increase in disposable income. The advocate finds that any money people make from UBI would just be slashed from their income by their employers. Then they tell you it will lead to an increase in investor confidence. This is only going to be super temporary. Sure, in the beginning, there'll be an increase in investor confidence because there's more consumption, but that consumption stays the same for the rest of history that we keep having UBI. So on net investor confidence would go back to normal. Then we can turn this against it. Because voice of the FEE explains that by providing a UBI score is higher consumption, because if that is true, then that would create inflation. As increases in demand and the money velocity, this is upwards pressure on prices, especially now as the economy nears full employment and productivity falls. In response, Fulmer of Investopedia finds the central bank raises interest rates to reduce inflation, which is why, following Trump's tax cuts, the Federal Reserve increased interest rates from 1.4% to 2.4%. And because these interest rates raise borrowing costs and crowd out private investment, 98% of economists believe a UBI would be bad for the economy. Then we can turn against them because means-tested welfare programs are crucial economic stabilizers. Hunger to the EPI explains that during recessions, more people naturally qualify for welfare programs, while less people qualify during periods of high growth. In this way, our welfare system automatically cools down the economy when it's overheating and heats up the economy when it's barely standing, prolonging economic growth and shortening recessions. Because of this, Hood of JP Morgan finds that while recessions used to occur every 26 months, they now happen every 86 months, and recessions have terrible implications for the global poor, because the UN finds that the last recession pushed 90 million people into extreme poverty worldwide. Finally, their impact evidence is that a UBI would increase economic growth by 13%. But Smatters of Wharton redoes this study. It's terrible and adds extra controls in a better model and finds that a UBI would decrease US GDP by 9.3%. And again, 98% of the economists believe a UBI would be bad for the economy.
Okay, yeah, I mean, that's fine. The most important strategy in debate, as far as, like, advocacy and, like, case writing and stuff goes, is controlling the uniqueness, which we actually might not have a video on it because I've been wanting to do it, like, really well and really do it up, but then wanting to put in a lot of effort also makes me not want to bother. Controlling the uniqueness is controlling the narrative of whether the status quo is good or bad. And I already mentioned why that's really important, but so debate's really just about risk assessment. And the traditional model for risk assessment, the way like insurance companies do it, right? Or if you look up the Wikipedia article on risk assessment, it says that risk assessment is a system of predicting what positive and negative outcomes are going to be, and then evaluating how significant those the effects of those positive and negative outcomes would be, and then how probable they are. And then there's a bunch of formulas that you learn if you go to college and have a really boring major, and then that'll lead you to understand whether or not to make that decision. But the fact of the matter is that that's not how human beings actually make their decisions, right? If you had a case, or let's say like a strategy that you could change, and you go to a tournament and you go through every prelim, and this case is just bombing, right? You're just losing round after round, and everybody hates this argument. It's very easy to beat. You're just losing the rounds, and then in your last prelim you think, you know what? I think I thought of a better argument that we should use instead. Ask yourself how likely you would be to try that new argument. Most people I ask say very likely. Now consider the opposite. You go to a tournament, you have a argument, and it's just knocking heads in. You go undefeated through prelims, you're flying through throughout rounds, and then you're going into the final, and then you think, oh, I think I thought of an argument that's even better than the one I've been using. How likely would you be to change the argument for the new one? Most people would not change the argument. The traditional model of risk assessment thinks of these two scenarios as identical, because it's still, here is the projected value of what I have, the projected value of this other one is X% better. And a insurance company or whatever would say, no, let's switch. But the way human beings make actual decisions is the status quo good? Are things going well? If things are going well, you are resistant to changing things. And if things are going badly, you're willing to accept higher and higher risks to change things. It's why people in poverty are way more likely to buy lottery tickets, even though even a rich person or an upper middle class person would love to win a $50 million jackpot, and it would hurt them a lot less to spend even like $1,000 on lottery tickets. Whereas it hurts people in poverty a lot, or at least comparatively a lot more, for them to spend the money they have on lottery tickets. But they play because the status quo sucks for them, so they're willing to accept bigger and bigger risks. There's also this guy who did like predictive analysis on who would win elections, and he guessed that Trump would win and whatever, and his model is basically entirely based on whether the public perceives the status quo to be good or not, and less based on what are the outcomes that people are predicting. That was a super long explanation, but I think the reason why debaters will look at a round like this and think this is a really good, really high level round, which I'm not trying to knock the debaters. They're all incredibly talented, and they're better debaters than I ever was, and they're all wonderful, and they all dress better than I do. But I think people look at this kind of debate and think, wow, this debate's really good because it could really go either way. But that's not usually the mark of a very good round strategically, right? When you look at a really high level like college strategic round, you still end up with like, 3-0 losses, 5-0 losses. Like, it's in other words, like, the decision isn't super hard to make. It just, like, whether it worked or not, or like, there's a lot of layers of strategy and counter strategy at play, but at the end of the day, it doesn't feel like a toss-up where either side could have won. If it does feel like either side could have won, then that's probably an indication that the impact game isn't very strong, and that the links don't provide any clear method for you to prefer one side to the other, which can feel competitive, but it just feels I don't know. To me, it just isn't what I think of when I think of like competitive play, right? Like think about chess. I've rambled too much. Do I even have time? My class is so soon. I guess I'll have to finish this after my class. Do I even want to do that? Whatever. Let's get at least through to the next cross-X.
Start at the top of our first contention. They say that overall poverty has fallen by 40%, but our more holistic precedent evidence says the number of people in poverty has remained stagnant at 10%.
Like, again, how do I know it's holistic? How do I know it's more holistic? I don't see their evidence, I don't see your evidence, and if I try to call that card and compare, well, let's look at which one is more holistic, that's going to take forever. And it's just not a good debate event when, like, you're trying to win based on the like minute differences in your cards, but I don't get to see your cards, and you're not just like posting a speech doc.
50 years. Their evidence says relative to some other threshold, it is around the same. That does not matter. The fact of the matter is the majority of people who were in poverty in 50 years ago are still in poverty now. Let's go to our first argument about disincentivizing work. We'll concede that fewer than 1% of people are within 10 percentage points of the income line, which means they don't have access to any of their terms because no one's actually affected by these by the disincentive to work. Let's go to our second mention of economic growth. Their first response tells you we have strong consumer demand right now. The real problem is weak business demand. That doesn't change the fact
that was a pretty clean kick. Kicked out of the argument pretty cleanly. I think you can tell that Nueva gets coached by people who didn't strictly do public forum and probably did something like Parley or LD. So the like technical aspects on the right on Nueva, they seem to be a little bit more technically proficient and know more techniques.
Right now, our Murray evidence our Matthews evidence case, you can still inject $2.5 trillion worth of spending into the economy over 8 years and create 4.7 million jobs. It does not matter how strong or weak consumer demand is right now. All that matters is in the long term we're going to increase it. And our Matthews evidence also says even if it's high right now, in the long run you're going to see permanent economic stimulus, whereas all of their evidence are short term. So even if consumer demand is high now, when it eventually goes down, we'll still have the same stimulus, which overall lifts everything up. Their second response tells you from Advocate that employers would slash their income. What the UN finds in 2017 is that a UBI would give the average worker more negotiating power. For example, if their worker is slashing their income, they can step away from that job and use their extra UBI money to go look for another job until workers eventually realize they have to pay their workers the employers realize they have to pay their workers the fair share. Their third argument is about investor confidence. They say that investor confidence will return to normal. That's critical because our Narayan evidence indicates it would not be normal. It would be normal at a higher rate. If there's more people buying goods, then investors are more confident in the economy and more willing to put money in those goods. Their fourth response basically says this massive turn about inflation. But Zeza 17, the Roosevelt Institute, finds that even if you take inflation at its worst, A, there have been no historical examples of any other UBI causing this, but second, at most, it would be half a percentage point of inflation. Additionally, Zeza also says their story is all about interest rate hikes, but Zeza says with this inflation, he would not forecast any sort of increase in interest rates. Finally, they tell you that in a recession, more people qualify for welfare. They're misrepresenting their argument. What Econ 17 finds is the actual programs that increase during recession are A, more progressive taxation, and B, unemployment insurance. Neither of those are means-tested welfare. They don't access either of those arguments on the automatic stabilizers. Finally, they say a UBI would decrease debt by 9%, but that card is predicated on the assumption that debt would be finite in the U.S. economy. What Tully 18 finds is the U.S. has an essentially infinite debt ceiling because you can always take out more money, and investors are always confident in the U.S.'s ability to pay down its bond. Let's go to their case. On their first argument about targeted benefits, we would say at best my opponents access keeping people around the poverty line, but they never access long-term growth. We would say that our employment impacts in our case for 4.7 million jobs are always going to be more important in the long run because people can actually lift their families out of poverty instead of the people who are hovering at the poverty line now. Their second argument is about people being poor, about the UBI is $28,000. This is completely fake. This number is fabricated altogether. What Alternate 17 finds is the real amount the average person gets from welfare is $9,000 because it takes the amount of money they spend on welfare and the amount of welfare recipients. That's the real calculation. It's actually less than what a UBI would be. This also applies to the third argument about families because in our world, the average single mother is getting more than she is now. Under their world, it's only around $9,000 for the average welfare benefit, especially considering the average calculation uses a single mother, so on net you're making more money in our world. Let's go to their second tension about the topping block. We have a couple responses here, but all of it centered around the idea of recession. What Econ 19 finds is that if economic growth is permanently higher as it would be in our world, we are less susceptible to future economic shocks, pushing the entire economy into recession. There are two reasons why recession is important. The first is it affects people across the globe. In fact, what the IMF finds is 900 million people will go into poverty. This means if the entire US economy is slumped, then it ends up cutting all of the aid benefits that we talk about the fastest because it generates a lot of political change to prioritize the US and not focus on the rest of the world. But second, recognize if the US economy is growing, the positive effects will spread across the globe. Aurora 05 of the IMF finds a 1% increase in economic growth for developed countries leads to a 0.8% increase in the developing world. We would say you're always preferring our growth argument because if countries are lifting themselves up, it's on that going to lead to a more sustainable long-term solution versus when aid does get cut in the long run, those countries are going to have nothing to rely on and they're just going to fall back into the greater economy.
So I think that speech pretty much demonstrates what I was saying about, like, you need something else to go for. Just make the round easier, right? Like, look, here's our responses on economy, but this is relatively unanswered to. Like, this other argument is unanswered. I think we had some argument about, like, welfare keeps women in abusive relationships because it's structured in a way that is supposed to incentivize them to stay with abusers rather than become single mothers. Or whatever, right? And, like, in that case, you can say, look, the economy might go up, the economy might go down, but at least we're giving women an alternative to, you know, getting the shit beaten out of them by their husbands. That is an out, right? So there's that. But I think the other thing here is that there's no clear sequencing in this round with the arguments, right? I don't know, because everything is about the economy, everything's about the same impact, everything's about different, like, links to the economy going up or down. One team kind of just needs to win all of them. And, like, for example, let's talk about, like, inflation and single mothers, right? So what happens if the Aff wins that single mothers are going to be better off because like with the amount of overall money they get, but the negative wins that inflation is going to increase, right? There's no clear sequencing of which of these arguments comes first, which of them controls the overall impact most. And because of that, I think all of them are going to try to go for all of the arguments for the entire debate. And you're just going to have shorter and shorter speeches to try to talk about every single thing. It's going to be really hard for you to say, look, at the end of the day, the biggest factor that controls whether the impact happens or not is this thing. And we've won that this thing happens, right? So I don't know where the sequencing there is. Like, how do we rank these arguments in order of importance so that we know which are the ones that you actually need to win in order to win the debate? That work can be done a little bit later in the debate, but I don't know. I feel like it's set up in a way that's going to make that work harder. Am I okay on time? 10 minutes. Let's listen to this cross-X.
Yeah, sure. So how do you prevent a recession?
That's the evidence. The Econ evidence says if the U.S. economy is always growing stronger, the kind of economic shocks that would traditionally push into recession are able to be buoyed back by the growth.
Wait, what about every other country? Why can't any other country cause a recession? Why can't Europe cause a global recession?
So no other country is connected to the extent that the U.S.
Yeah, Europe is.
But
China is.
Europe is not a country; it's a system of other countries, and the European Central Bank.
Okay, even more.
The European Bank has a very.
Why is that unique to the negative? Or, sorry, the affirmative?
The U.S. doesn't benefit from that kind of.
Europe has definitely. The United States is not the only country that can cause a recession. Other countries have done it in the past.
Sure, maybe
so I'm saying if there's even if you stop recession from the United States,
So is the argument that recessions are inevitable, but when they happen, welfare can get us out more effectively than UBI can? I guess, but I don't know.
Your evidence about 900 million definitely isn't about the United States. It says any global economic shock will cause that. So literally any other country could do that, even if you stop the United States.
Two problems. One, our freedom evidence specifically isolates the U.S. as being the causal factor. And we would say it's pretty logical that, like, sure, maybe some other country can cause a recession, but as long as the U.S.
I think this answer is too dodgy. Just give them that link.
So that's consumer spending will help the United States. But you don't.
Like you're kicking your argument well, right? When you know the argument against it, and that indicates a good round vision, right? Like, you know what? We don't need this in order to win. They have a bunch of turns. Let's not bother with this. Extend the defense and let's move on. But I think you should be taking a similar approach here, where you're just kind of painting yourself into a corner, but you're making this argument seem more important than it probably has to seem. You're looking dodgy. You're not really like controlling the kid on the left is really like controlling this cross-X effectively, and if it's a very difficult round and I don't really have a clear thing to vote on, like, I'm probably gonna vote for the team that just seems like they're winning. And I think at the end of the day, a lot of judges do that.
Actually, 900 million people in other countries.
If you let me finish, I would have explained it.
So the first one didn't matter then, yeah.
No, it does matter. There's hundreds of millions of people who live in poverty in the United States. Where each
Hundreds of millions of people in poverty in the United States.
100 million people who would be impacted by recessions. But second,
Yeah, 'cause there's
second and more importantly,
hundreds of
sorry, I never
millions
even got to
in the
finish my
US.
first thought.
Okay.
Here, Aurora evidence says a 1% increase in developed countries' growth leads to a 0.8% increase in these developing countries.
That doesn't
So as
mean that
long-
you decrease poverty in these countries.
What
You
it-
don't need any evidence on that.
what it
We
does
say, see, this doesn't make any sense. You increase consumption, people are buying more from American businesses. How does that reduce poverty in Africa?
Okay, let's look at a really quick comparison, right? We're going to say
Just
that
answer my question.
What?
How does more buying from American businesses reduce poverty in Africa?
We import goods, for example, natural resources and oil from African consumers.
And how do exports help the African poor who are
It's not-
disconnected from
it's not-
export sectors?
You just make that analysis. We would say that they're
Yes,
not
I did.
disconnected. Like, millions of Africans work inside of these export sectors. Like, Africa doesn't just have an economy that's completely
So why is it that
disparate.
you can't raise a single piece of evidence on that?
What? You just asked me this random line of questioning.
Why is
I'm
it that
answering it to the
I'm
best of my
asking?
ability.
Why is it that your argument is that you increase growth in developing countries but not poverty?
Okay, let's talk about poverty alleviation then. The only card you read about poverty alleviation, your second mention, talks about
Actually, we have 3 cards about it, but yeah.
talks about an HDI, or a Human Development Index.
Yeah.
Can you explain what a 1% increase in an HDI means for poverty?
Yeah,
You're so
so-
good at quantifying poverty.
Thank you. So an HDI is a measure of livelihood that includes education, healthcare, income. So let's like a 1% decrease in that would be like a 1% decrease in what I just said.
I'd love to see the evidence, because that's what we called for before our rebuttal, and you showed us evidence said HDI increases by 5% maybe, and then it doesn't really say anything about
I don't think it
poverty.
said maybe.
I mean, the card basically said it would possibly increase.
It would, yeah. It would.
It said possibly, but regardless. Maybe I read it
I
wrong.
mean, you didn't respond to the impact, so that doesn't really matter.
That was kind of a bad cross-X, team. What's up with that? Yeah, the neg is trying to go for this argument that, like, look, maybe the domestic number goes up or goes down, but we have unique access to foreign aid, which is going to help the poor in other countries, and nothing they do links into this, which is functionally the only thing in the round that's able to do what I've been talking about. Am I okay on time? 4 minutes. The only thing that's... Only thing in the round that's able to do what I've been talking about, which is to have an out, right? Where you're just like, look, we're the only ones with access to this argument, so if we can prove that that's an important issue, or the most important issue, is a clean win for us. They're trying to do that kind of late in the debate, or at least late in the strategy, right? Like, if that's... I think you could have had a lot stronger arguments for that, or at least had something that wasn't basically just the same links into the same impact, but in a slightly different place. With that said, I think the way that question should have been answered... I can't even remember the actual phrasing of the question. Why is this camera so bad? Anyway, the way the question was actually phrased was it even how do you help people? No, it was like recessions happen in other countries. How do you prevent recessions from happening in other countries? And I think the way you answer that is we don't. And then if they try to make the argument that reject the Aff because it can't prevent a recession, you got 2 more speeches left to be like, neither does the negative. Their best argument is that, like welfare has stabilizers in it that help us recover from recessions and whatever faster. But like that's the argument that they've already made, right? Like if that argument was going to hurt you, then it was already going to hurt you. You just wasted all of your cross-X on that, though. You didn't get anything out of it. Then there's this other issue about, like, well, we help the poor in these countries through foreign aid, which doesn't have any uniqueness, right? It says that, like, this many people have historically been helped by foreign aid, and foreign aid is really unpopular. But, isn't the fact that it's really unpopular probably an indication that it's going to decrease more in the future, and all of the status quo is that, like, Trump is pulling back foreign aid? And yeah, I don't know. I just don't think that they win in the status quo. We are sending a specific amount, like a lot of money to these people, nor do they win that this necessarily trades off. It's just like a really weak trade-off argument that, like, well, you'd need the money from somewhere, and we bet it will come from foreign aid, even though no UBI proposal ever has called for decreasing foreign aid. I gotta go teach a class. Maybe I'll finish this after. Alright, it's 2 hours later, and I got like 20-something minutes before I have to coach again. So let's see how much farther we can get into this round. I don't know how well you can hear the background noise, but kind of is what it is. All right. I'm gonna be really upset if that previous video didn't pick up the debate sound, but I'm pretty sure it did. I choose to believe. Is this prep time? Because you're using like 30 seconds to like get the paper up and open the water, and seems a lot like preparation.
They try to turn off first contention by saying the benefits they receive right now are around $9,000 that would increase under a UBI. But their evidence from 2012, the University of Michigan redoes their analysis in 2019 and finds that the average recipient of means-tested welfare is around $21,000, which means that in the Aff world you're decreasing the income from means-tested welfare that these people get. Go to their second contention. We're winning round because we explained that a pay for a UBI will cost $3.8 trillion, which would force budget cuts. And given that 60% of Americans support cutting foreign aid, this would be the first thing to get cut. The Reagan analysis, which they never respond to, finds that foreign aid has historically been the first thing to get cut in tough budgetary times.
I mean, they're right that it doesn't get responded to, which is like an entire contention. I don't know how that gets dropped, but and I guess the evidence that's like it's however much in benefits versus the 9,000 is pretty good given the context of this debate, but again, like it's temporary, which how is whatever, let's keep going.
That aid has provided for 40% of the global population, lifting tens of millions of people out of extreme poverty. There are 2 responses. First, that in a recession, aid is going to get cut. The CS News explains that in the 08 recession, aid grew by 80%. There's no link. But their next response is that recessions outweigh the foreign aid. Couple of responses. First, the FDER explains that foreign aid allows developing countries to build up their economies and resist future recessions, which means by giving aid, we sell back for future recessions. Second, there's no quantification on their side. You don't know
what? How many global recessions get caused in countries that get like foreign aid to feed the poor? Like, like Zambia's economy collapse didn't cause a global recession. Do you have a card that says global aid prevents recession? Did I miss that? I don't know.
Are lifted out of poverty when they prevent recession, but you know that tens of millions of people are lifted out of poverty every single year because of the United States.
But also, like, public forum debaters are obsessed with econ arguments, and it's honestly like a little gross. Because you're talking about literally feeding millions of people, and your impact framing for why that matters is like, could help the economy. Like, like, come on.
But third, recessions don't impact the developing countries because they're primarily exporting inelastic goods. That's why the St. Louis Fed explains that Asian and African countries were unaffected by the 08 recession. Their GDP grew by 50% in the following years. Foreign aid leads to schools, infrastructure, and hospitals that lift people out of poverty in the long term. But fifth, they're linked into recession.
Like, yeah, it's good you're mentioning schools and hospitals and stuff, but like, one, don't frame it through poverty alone because you want more unique impacts, but two, you're defending the status quo, where millions of people are dying from poverty in these places. Like, the status quo is not great. The status quo is not solving for world hunger or global poverty. So maybe try to frame it around something that's going a little bit better.
That there's more consumption of American goods. Even if you buy this only benefits American businesses and helps American poor. We explained that aid goes directly to developing countries who are much more in need of this aid because poverty is much worse in these countries. We're impacting the most dire people. The round is over. But with that, let's go to their case. On their first contention, but just about welfare being bad, they try to kick out of our terms about how we mean such welfare encourage work by saying that the work cliff doesn't matter. Even if it doesn't exist, we say that means sense welfare encourages work. They drop the golden appetite explains. The means sense welfare has been reformed to encourage work. Research shows that welfare increases the amount of work that's being done. They do the weighing for you. Employment is the best way to decrease long-term poverty. We're the only team that structurally incentivizes people to get jobs in the long term. We're winning on their case. On their second contention about global growth, two terms. First, the voice evidence explains that UBI increases in consumption, which is going to cause inflation, which forces central banks to increase interest rates, which then would cause a decrease in investment. That's why the word evidence redoes all of their studies about GDP growing and finds that GDP would actually decrease by 90%. They, like, all the responses about our evidence is bad, call for it is really good. Then we say that means sensitive welfare acts as an automatic stabilizer. When the economy is doing well, less people qualify for the means sensitive welfare, it cools down the economy. When it's doing bad, more people qualify and injects capital. That's why the hood evidence explains that while recessions used to occur every 26 months, now they occur every 86 months. They just say that our evidence is not about means sensitive welfare don't act as automatic stabilizers. It does. Call for the evidence. It talks about things like food stamps. This is extremely important because this said the UN explains that the last recession put 90 million people into poverty. We are best mitigating the impacts of recession when they occur.
La la la, pretty good. So far, I mean, it looks to me like the Aff mishandled their only unique piece of offense, which is giving me an easy out, right? Like, it would be even better if it wasn't framed around the exact same impact, but so far I'm expecting the Neg to win because they talk about foreign aid with a really wonky link that just gets dropped. I'm not flowing. Maybe it doesn't get dropped, but I don't know. I'd be curious to hear a pretty good answer pretty much right now. Oh my god, you're still calling for cards? Great.
In this summary, they've dropped that welfare has been stagnant over the past 50 years and stayed at 10%. That's the drop precedent evidence. That's really important because what it proves is that welfare is actually improving people's overall quality of life. If anything, jobs are the only way to ensure that we have an irreversible chain out of poverty. And that goes to the first argument they make on this turns out means sensitive welfare encouraging work. We have conceded their response that tells you only 1% of people aren't actually employed, which means none of their incentives work. All of our job impacts clearly outweigh on scope. With that, let's go to the second contention about economic growth. They extended a lot of terms through in here. They don't respond to any of pronounced front lines. First term is about increasing inflation. They completely drop these. That's analysis that tells you that no historical examples prove that American production is high enough to actually cause inflationary spirals. But B, they drop that even in the best case scenario, there'd only be 0.5 percentage point increase in inflation. First of all, to trigger any impact.
Like, they drop that stuff, I guess, but they go for arguments that say the opposite, right? Like how is it dropping the argument that you are going to increase jobs if they respond by saying that welfare is the strongest, like, pipeline into people getting jobs? Like, they haven't conceded the advocacy, they just didn't respond specifically to a problem within the card. But it's not like you have clean access to that link.
We're not caused the Fed to change any single policy, which means they don't have access to any other interest rate scenario. The second term, then they extend this war on GDP evidence, but this completely assumes that debt is finite. They completely drop the utility evidence again here, which tells you that U.S. debt is not finite and can borrow infinitely, which means none of their analysis applies. The third term, they extend this automatic stabilizers argument. They completely drop the Icon 17 evidence that tells you the actual programs that are effective under automatic stabilizers are not means-tested welfare, they're unemployment insurance and progressive taxation, which does not go away in our world. We still solve for recessions better. But second,
I mean, he says it's food stamps, but again, like, I guess I have to call the card.
and more importantly, their own card concedes unemployment insurance is one of the major causes of why automatic stabilizers doesn't work, but for us there. Then you can extend all the offenses conceded. They drop the math there and tells you UBI would increase $2.3 trillion permanently into the economy and raise 4.7 million jobs as a permanent and irreversible economic stimulus to the U.S. economy, which doesn't go away in an affirmative world. But then they drop the Burgeon evidence tells you every 1% increase in GDP creates 1 million jobs, and we're getting 4.5 million jobs, 4.5 million jobs permanently. Interwadi evidence says jobs is the best way to get out of poverty. It's a clear affirmative ballot insofar as jobs growth is the most important way you're going to be voting on any poverty impacts. Now let's get into their case. At the top.
I think he's picking up a lot of drops, apparently. I don't know. But ultimately, like, I don't understand, like, what the point of them is. So the only, like, framing of, like, what the implication of that drop is, or, like, that argument, why that specific argument leads to a ballot, is that they're talking about job growth, which I don't think is the right collapse, like, because they have arguments on job growth that I'm not hearing answers to. So it's kind of like two ships passing in the night. Classic public forum, right? Like, well, I have a guy that says it'll increase jobs. I have a guy that says it'll decrease jobs, which is probably another indication that making your entire case reliant on predictive evidence is bad, because you'll pretty much find an economist saying whatever you're talking about will improve the economy, and then you'll find somebody else that says it'll hurt the economy. But it's way less controversial or, like, refutable to say, like, this is the current GDP, which is what you would be doing by focusing a lot more attention on saying whether the status quo is good or bad.
They extend this evidence from Michigan that tells you that people receive $21,000 a year, but we literally read the methodology. It says it's the amount of welfare, which is how many people are in poverty. The alternate evidence is pretty clear telling you that
I want to just, like, indicate real quick that, like, both partners during this last speech haven't been that helpful. Like, kind of, like, standing up or, like, gesturing or signaling or whatever, but, like, you're not actually conveying anything to your partner. Like, neither sitting partner has affected or influenced what their partner is saying in any way. So probably just focus on your next speech and try to make your team seem strong and not seem like you're panicking or you think your partner's doing a bad job. If you were communicating properly and, like, puppeting their speech, that would be one thing, right? And probably still wouldn't be great. But you're not really even doing that in this instance. You're just kind of gesturing and getting ignored. Just don't do it. Nodding and stuff is fine. Like this, right? Like, what did that do?
less susceptible to overall international shocks. The IMF says that there's 900 million people to poverty. That's their own evidence that tells you the global poor are affected. But anyway, the moral evidence functions as its own independent offense because it tells you positive effects of 1% increase in growth in the United States and developed countries leads to a 0.8% increase in growth in the developing world. That's really important for two implications. The first implication is that means other countries develop decrease reliance on US aid, which means when aid inevitably it gets cut in any world, countries can...
Yeah, you're not gonna win my ballot with a like our economy trickles down into helping people in like abject poverty in the developing world in as effective a way as like direct foreign aid. I mean, you're just not gonna win that.
Can still be sustainable, but B, it allows people to actually grow organically. The impact card comes with their own evidence that we just read, which tells you aid lifts people out of poverty by increasing economic growth. It says aid through economic growth lifts 10 million people out of poverty. So clearly, the most quantified way to increase economic growth is in an affirmative world. There is no evidence that tells you how much economic growth happens in a negative world with aid. We tell you specifically every 1% increase.
Aid isn't about an economic. I mean, the problem with the Neg is that they made aid about economic growth, but they didn't strictly make it about economic growth. And like, again, like this is where you don't want to make every argument about the same impact, because then every argument they read is an answer to every argument you read. When you make your arguments framed around it, how am I doing on time? Am I late? No, I'm alright. I got like 10 minutes. When you frame your argument around different impacts, they can't just answer back every one of your arguments with their favorite argument.
In U.S. growth, increase in developing world by 0.8%. It's a very clear opt out.
Oh God, Grand Crossfire.
So, what kind of automatic stimulus did the U.S. issue during the 2008 recession?
Food stamps, means of welfare.
Which ones were actually effective at reducing poverty?
Means of welfare.
Well, our ICAN evidence indicates it's actually not means of welfare, but rather two
So
programs.
ICAN evidence says means of welfare did not help.
It says there's only two programs that
See,
work.
the reason that doesn't respond is because our good evidence is the empirical analysis. It says that recessions have gone from every 26 months to 86
Right,
months.
right.
Yes, it says unemployment insurance. It also says food stamps.
Right, so this is it. Your evidence, right, is saying, look, we did an entire package that included food stamps, other assistance programs, but also included like unemployment insurance and progressive taxation. And that decreased overall recession. Right? Our argument specifically isolates each individual program under the broader program and says,
No, because your argument is not looking at our study. Our study says food stamps are specifically part of the reason why we're from 26 to 86. The judges can call for this. We're just talking about this.
Another card that we now have to call for, and two cards in fact, because I have to know whether one card's talking about the other card, and like, it's semi, so it's probably like getting about time for the next round to happen, and just come on, public
So
forum.
here's what your evidence says. It says unemployment insurance and food stamps contributed to this overall.
Like, how many public forum rounds come down to, here's what your evidence says? No, that's not what your evidence says. What does your evidence say? My evidence says this. Call for that. Like, if only we had a way of knowing what the evidence said, because you read it out loud in the speech, but also gave me the evidence to check as we're going, right? Like, I don't understand. Just very basic question. Speech docs. Why don't public forum debaters share speech docs? You're reading off of a document. Give that to the judge and your opponent. It'll just help them follow along. Help them see your evidence. And it'll make flowing easier, right? I barely flow college LD because I have the script for your speech right in front of me. So I can just go back and see whether you did say something or not. And I don't understand the disadvantage to sharing a document that contains words you're gonna say. Like, are you just worried that then they won't drop something? Like, what's the... My point here is that your strategy in debate should hinge on you being good at debate and debating other people who are good at debate. If your strategy is like, I hope they don't follow my like hell of casual pace and drop that I said something that if they responded to would fall apart, like, what are we doing? Anyway, I'm short on time. Let's see. Yeah, let's do the grand crossfire, and then we'll come back in another hour, and we'll do the other thing, final focus.
So that means if you don't have Fed stamps, even though there's unemployment insurance, there'll be much less of that effect.
Okay. Our evidence goes one step further and says of those programs, unemployment insurance is the one that is effective at alleviating the
No, your evidence does not say that means that welfare is not effective.
You never called for it.
Because I know that doesn't exist.
Okay, I guess I'm really good at cutting cards because I found the card that says.
So your evidence says that unemployment insurance did everything and means as welfare did not.
It says the two effective programs were unemployment insurance and progressive taxation.
That does not mean that the other things were not also effective.
Right, but it means the majority of the work was done by the
No, because our evidence is specifically about the.
Like, are these judges watching this and going, "Yeah, this is some clash"? Because I would be wishing for death.
To our turn, because our evidence is the one that does the frequency analysis.
Literally, how are you going to resolve this? Is the other side going to say, like, "Oh, no, you're right, I am wrong"? Like, sounds like we have to call for the card.
Yeah, but our evidence is the one. Our evidence is the one that looks at how recessions have decreased in frequency.
Please. You have a question? No. Awesome.
So let's talk about your
Let's actually talk about HDI.
your card on growth. What is this? Your card on poverty mediation. What does it say? One line after talks about it.
I think every question in this debate has been, "What is your argument?" Which, again, they're like, debaters grow to fill the like shape and of the format they're in. Like, if you're in a very difficult debate format, you just get better faster, and it's not a question of. It's like if you only debate a novice, you're never gonna get to be a great debater. And public forum just has some really whack conventions that other formats of debate have just moved way past. And one of the places that it is the most frustrating for me, and that I wish I could have one seminar with like these kids at a camp or something or whatever, just cross-ex. Like, your cross-ex could get so much better with a 30-minute lecture on how to ask effective questions, or a 1-hour-long video. Am I out of time yet? Let's just finish this.
Okay, and Max does the comparative analysis in the summary. The kind of growth we do is building like schools, hospitals, roads. The kind of growth you do is buying from American businesses.
Right.
All that matters is that we quantify how much growth increases in our world. Yours is nebulous. Sure,
No,
maybe they
quantify
build.
growth. You do not quantify the effect on poverty. You do
Your
not have a
evidence does
single
not
piece of evidence that says that growth decreases
Yes,
poverty.
it does.
Your
Your
evidence.
No,
evidence.
our evidence says aid leading to
No,
growth
no,
decreases
it says
poverty.
aid.
We do the comparative analysis. You do not. That's
It's
not.
that time.
Great. That is time. Okay. We'll close the book on this debate in a little bit. It's great. All of the debaters are very talented. I like that they like the color blue. Is left kid wearing blue? Now it's gonna take like a year to load. Left kid, what color are you wearing? No, not exactly. Alright, bold. Okay.
Business demand. But
Oh
business
my
demand won't increase because of general economic fears. They don't change.
It's officially 5 hours after when we started. Okay. Let's go. That's not where we were. I was just trying to check out that guy's shirt. And I lost my place. Okay, we were after my least favorite speech in public forum. That is not the specific person. I just hate Grand Cross. Like, I've never heard a Grand Crossfire where it was like, ooh, enlightening. That really clarified things.
None of their incentives worked. All of our job impacts clearly outweigh our scope. With that, let's go to the second contention about economic growth. They extended
Was that it? No, is this the?
All that matters.
Oh yeah, here we go.
Countries. There's a reason they can't read evidence that says that in a summary. First, recessions do not affect.
Okay. I can already tell that they're speeding up a lot. Am I in frame here? Yeah, okay. I can tell that they're speeding up a lot in Final Focus, and it's probably because they're trying to like contain a lot of information within the Final Focus, which, like, one thing I will give Public Forum is that they named Final Focus pretty well, right? Like, the idea is to narrow down your focus in the debate. So if you're doing it well and you're collapsing effectively, you shouldn't need to be going terribly fast. Not that Public Forum speed ever hits terribly fast, but you know what I'm trying to say. Like, relative to your other speeches, it shouldn't be the fastest. Your rebuttal speech should be the fastest.
We're winning off our second contention about how paying for a $4 trillion UBI would force budget cuts, given that 60% of Americans support cutting foreign aid. That would be the first to go. The Iranian analysis, which they never respond to, finds that foreign aid has historically been the first thing to get cut in tough budgetary times. The work evidence says aid has provided for 40% of the global population, lifting tens of millions of extreme poverty out of extreme poverty every year. They make this growth and recession response. They do not.
Yeah, that's a pretty good overview. And it's the right thing to collapse on. I would have done that a little slower and clearer, kind of talk about the impact framing. So he says, which gets 40 people out of poverty a year or whatever, right? But kind of explain at the top a little bit more slowly, like, why, if you win your links to this impact, it outweighs everything else in the round. So the way I might have given that would be something like, I don't know, something along the lines of, you'll be voting for the negative at the end of this debate for Lake Highland KS on contention, what is it, contention 3? On contention 3, which tells you that UBI trades off with foreign aid that goes directly to people in poverty. This is the clearest place for you to vote in this debate because it's the only argument that doesn't have contradictory evidence on like whether the economy improves or doesn't improve, but it's also the most direct impact where people's lives are directly being saved rather than through some roundabout mechanism. Something along those lines. Obviously, I'm pretty tired. And at that sort of pace, right? And then you can kind of get into proving that you do win that argument. But I think it's effective to start out with basically writing the ballot. Here is the argument I'm voting on. Here is why I'm voting on that argument. And then here's a little bit of detail on like why I believe that the winning team accesses that argument.
Quantum Max's 6 front lines in a summary. First, recessions do not affect aid. From the CS News, aid increased 80% during the last recession. Second, their evidence about 900 million people going to poverty is just about a global economic shock. Even if they prevent American economic shock, a global economic shock will still happen. So there is no uniqueness on their side. But American foreign aid has uniquely lifted millions of people out of poverty. Third, the FDER explains that foreign aid allows developing countries to build up their economies and resist recessions in the future. They affect one recession, we allow them to recover from every recession in the future. Fourth, there's no quantification on
I don't know
side.
about...
All they do is tell you that growth increases in developing countries. There's a reason they can't read evidence that says that poverty decreases. We're the only team that does that. The kind of growth that aid does is building education, food, like hospitals, roads, like infrastructure, things that actually reduce poverty from the ground up. That's why you know it increases the human development index by 3%. They only say American businesses increase consumption and that leads to exports. It's super nebulous, no link to poverty. Finally, growth does not help developing countries because they import inelastic goods, which is why we say that whether there's growth or whether there's a recession, we import the same amount from developing countries. Imports do not link anything. That's why the St. Louis Fed finds that Asia and Africa increased their GDP by 50% the year after the last recession. Again, foreign aid is long-term, it's structural, and it's always there. That's the first place you vote for us. We outweigh on all fronts on that level. Also, on their case, we vote off the term. We tell you the hunger for demons tells you that means-tested welfare acts as an economic stabilizer because More people qualify for it when the economy is doing bad, and less qualify when the economy is doing good. Our evidence is very good. Call for it. It says that unemployment insurance and food stamps have led to the frequency of recessions decreasing from every 26 months to every 86 months. It is very explicit. This turns their argument because even if they help recessions, we make them happen less often. Please call for the evidence. It isolates what means as a rule.
Good final focus. Given the context of like what you had to go for, I would say that's the best speech in the round so far. And yeah, like, call for the evidence. I don't get to see it or whatever, but like I don't really care at this point. I have my easy out, which is, as predicted, the only argument that isn't just talking about the same impact scenario of econ up in the U.S. or econ down in the U.S. But like, just imagine if at the end of this debate you could say like, there's a lot of evidence on both sides about what will happen with the economy, but it's only our side gives access to helping women leave abusive relationships, which is gonna outweigh on magnitude, but probably also probability, because there's no competing evidence arguing that you don't get women out of these domestic situations. I think that's a really effective like out for a judge, rather than like, imagine if they didn't have this foreign aid argument and literally the judge had to make a decision based on what the two cards do say and whether they answer each other. It's just a mess, and that's not good debating. Making the judge look at the other person's evidence and look at your evidence and compare the two and make their own decision, that's debating to the extent that, like, I guess you read two pieces of evidence and noticed that they contradict each other. But really, the judge is doing all the work, right? And it just slows down. No judge wants to do it. Tournaments don't want it to become a norm because it would slow down. It would slow down every round, every tournament to a halt. If every round the main enforcement mechanism for evidence ethics is the judges calling for the evidence, you're not going to be able to have a tournament with like 5 prelims and 5 out rounds. Okay. Also, are they calling for evidence before the final focus? Like, what do you need to see that you haven't seen? But also, like, just call for their entire case. Or just disclose to each other. I feel like I'm taking crazy pills.
Order is going to be our second contention, your second contention. Is everyone ready? Alright, start time now. Their final focus, they can see that jobs in the U.S. are the most important impact. We specifically give you the warrant when we tell you that jobs are the only way to lead to long-term climbing the cycle of poverty, insofar as they have dropped this wing. It does.
Like, you don't drop. They said that something else was the most important. How is that conceding that yours is the most important? That's not how concessions work. Disagreeing with something is not conceding just because you didn't, like, quote verbatim the thing that they said. I don't know how else to explain that, and I don't know if I need to explain it or...
Not matter about the developing world. They agree that jobs are the most important impact. Let's go to how we are creating jobs. Their only our Matthews evidence indicates a UBI would give money to the lower and middle class, leading to $2.3 trillion of spending and 4.7 million jobs. And the Bernstein evidence says, the Zessa evidence says, we would see 12% increase in growth, which the Bernstein evidence says every 1% increase in growth leads to 1 million jobs. If you buy that jobs are the most important impact, you're voting out for this conceded impact that we create the most jobs in the round.
Why do I care about jobs other than you said and allegedly they concede that jobs are the most important impact? Like, it's not terminalized to anything that I actually give a shit about, right? Like, not that the other side did a really great job of explaining, like, foreign aid in some sense other than poverty. in the abstract sense, right? Like, I don't know who lives or dies because of anything happening in this debate and what that looks like on actual people's lived experiences and lives. But that's much more nebulous when we're going with a number of jobs, especially when the only framing around that impact is like they conceded it. Like, what's good about jobs? Like, it's not even like econ, right? It's just kind of like jobs as an independent concept. Like, why?
Their only response is that automatic stabilizers operate during a recession. But our ICANN evidence specifically says, isolate, that the most effective programs are two programs that would not go away if you vote for them. Even if there's some slight mitigation on using food stamps, our evidence specifically isolates the programs that are
Not go away if you vote for us is what he meant, but whatever. People get that mixed up all the time. It's not a real issue.
most effective would not go away. Therefore, we're winning jobs, we're winning the round. But even if you buy their developing growth argument, let's really talk about it. Their card says economic aid operates through economic growth, which then lifts 10 million people out of poverty. So the real way you're evaluating the round is who prioritizes economic growth in this round. The way that they prioritize economic growth is by building roads and hospitals. Our analysis is much more quantified and much clearer. We say every 1% increase in economic growth leads to a 0.8% increase in developing world growth. At the end of the day, it's the only quantified increase in economic growth in the developing world, and their own evidence says economic growth in the developing world is key to solving poverty. If you believe their card, which says growth pulls 10 million out of poverty, you're voting for us because we create growth in the US, which spreads to other countries, which eventually leads to overall growth. Their arguments about
That's really trickle-downy, and I don't know. There's a lot of like bouncing analysis from a lot of cards that I can't see. And I'm going to say that the status quo of 4 and 8 is good. I'm not given any reason to think that the status quo of 4 and 8 is bad. And I probably don't want to change it if it's good.
imports do not matter is empirically denied. Our Aurora evidence says it does lead to growth 8.8%, and they have dropped this. They also
They didn't drop it. They just said that it doesn't help like people directly. Like, economic growth doesn't necessarily translate to whether people have food. Like, people who aren't working have food. I don't know. That's certainly not dropped, right? Like, they argue about it in cross-ex. I think... Jeez, my jaw is so tense that I just clacked my teeth. I think what this speaker is doing is trying to frame everything as a drop, which, I don't know, maybe it works, but it's not good, right? Like, you've had pretty much the entire debate to make specific responses and specific analysis, but the only thing Nueva is going for here is vote for this argument, which is only good because they didn't respond to it. Like, if this was just a speech about, like, if this was a speech and there wasn't an opponent, and they're like, hey, here's why UBI is important, like, you're giving me basically zero analysis that gives me a reason to care about UBI. So far, it creates jobs, and for every 1% we improve the economy, 0.8% of that GDP growth applies to, I don't know, Somalia. But why? Like, what does that mean? Like, does that help them? How many percents are we going to increase the economy through UBI? Like, I don't have anything to compare here, right? Like, I don't have any metrics. Is UBI going to improve the GDP by 3%, thus 2.4% improvement in Zambia? And, like, what is that going to look like for Zambia? Especially if it trades off with foreign aid, which is a link you should never have conceded. You should never have let the negative say UBI gets paid for by cutting foreign aid when they don't have a single card that says that. They have a card that says foreign aid is unpopular, but they don't have a single card that says UBI trades off with foreign aid. And you shouldn't be able to you shouldn't be letting your opponents get away with an argument where they don't have a single card that says like a clear link from the topic to the contention. If they're just extrapolating and, you know, pulling arguments out of their ass, that's a great time in cross-ex to be like, why is it that none of the scholars that any of us have found on this UBI topic have made a direct link between UBI and foreign aid? But somehow you, a high school junior with a week of research, have uncovered this missing link in the UBI argument. Like, it's just not true. It's just not true. Anyway.
2 reasons why our growth is better than their aid. The first is other countries are going to develop better for the long term if they're using their own growth instead of relying on other people's aid. So when aid does inevitably get cut, they're going to
This all sounds really new.
Long-term growth, so the countries are always reliant on themselves, not some other outside actor. This also functions with their own case when they say aid is already unpopular. Vote after a long-term solution, both for jobs and the domestic development.
Aid is already unpopular would have been a great argument to read in your rebuttal, but it seems like the rightmost child on the screen, not in accuracy, just thought of a bunch of things that he should have said in his rebuttal, but too little too late. Take prep. I don't know. You're giving the easiest speech in public forum. That the second rebuttal is maybe the easiest, or like the most imbalanced speech in any debate event, where you hear the Aff speech, so you can prep during the Aff speech, then the neg gives are constructive, where you prep during that, and then there's Crossfire, which you're not in, so you can prep during that. Then there is a rebuttal from the affirmative, which you don't need to be responsive to, so you don't even need to listen, so you can prep during that, and then you can take prep time. That's like 4 minutes, 8 minutes, 10 minutes, 14 minutes, plus all of the time that people are taking between that, standing up and clearing their throat and giving each other their evidence. Like, let's actually take a look, right? When does the foreign aid argument get made?
Be incredibly costly. Dragger of the New York Post in 2018 reports that in a single year, a UBI of $12,000 per person would cost
Yeah.
permanent UBI. It is in 2017. Foreign aid is a single program in the budget. Foreign aid is seen as trading off the available resources. Ultimately, ranking of Stanford University in 2015 finds that foreign aid has empirically been the first thing on the chopping block.
Okay, foreign aid at 3:36. Let's hear the negatives rebuttal. That's 16 minutes later. Like, you had 16 minutes to come up with the argument. You said foreign aid is on the chopping block in the status quo, which probably means that a decrease in foreign aid is non-unique. You read your uniqueness in the wrong direction. If the status quo is not good for foreign aid, why would you defend the status quo? A purely analytical, effective, good argument that you did think of, but not in the 16 minutes that you had to prepare. And I think that's not necessarily just a criticism of that debater. It's a criticism of how public forum debaters prep. Like, what are you doing in this time? Like, are you listening to your partner's speech? What are you doing? Like, none of that concerns you. The moment you hear the affirmatives constructive, you need to start preparing answers. And you get like 16 minutes to do it. I don't even think they took prep. You get 60 minutes plus prep to plan probably the most important speech in the debate. Speaking second in public forum should be incredibly broken. But the teams just don't have the experience and strategy to make effective use of it. But if the speeches were structured this way in like policy, like the second speaking team would almost always win. Anyway, hopefully that's useful. Shout out to the person who requested this, and I'm gonna do anything else with my life now that has nothing to do with debate. Yeah, go ahead and let me know what else you want us to debate. Sorry if I seemed grumpy. I love doing this. I work literally every day. But debate stuff's going great. Currently, our college is ranked number 1 nationally in Parley, which is going to last maybe 4 or 5 more days until some more results are out. But we already took the screenshot. The school already put out the newsletter, so we're good. Berkeley can take number 1 now, or Elko, or whoever. Anyway, thanks. Take care. Wait, actually I forgot that the video has the RFDs in it. So let's watch the RFDs and decide whether we're going to talk shit about the judge's decision. Am I blurry? How do I fix that? I think if I tap this. Oh my god, I'm all HD now. Okay. Wait, Aff ballot?
No offense. First weighing and second American jobs. Thanks for a pretty clean Aff ballot. The jobs first weighing and second summary and second about focus is like abhorrently awful. No offense. But it's the only weighing debate that's in both summary and final focus, so I think it makes for the coolest Aff ballot.
Wait, what? One more time?
American jobs. Thanks for a pretty clean Aff ballot. The jobs first weighing and second summary and second about focus is like abhorrently awful. No offense. But it's the only weighing debate that's in both summary and final focus, so I think it makes for the coolest Aff ballot.
It's the only weighing in the debate that's both in the summary and final focus? That might be true. Did they not? Is this like one of those things where public forum debaters are like, yeah, they didn't say the thing in summary, but they said it in final focus, so don't vote on it? But did the other team never mention foreign aid in their summary?
I think that I can indict about automatic stabilizers in your evidence, and we're talking about, or including programs that didn't under any means test welfare cuts. And we don't really have any defense on the argument. Insofar as that's true, I think it's a pretty clean Aff ballot. You kind of grow from the United States and job creation, which makes for a pretty clean Aff ballot. I think the foreign aid and relevant world debate is a lot closer. I don't really have to evaluate it because of the weighing, so I don't really do that. If I do though, I think that I would still probably end up saying that the Aff is narrowly ahead insofar as the evidence from the Neg would indicate that the internal link between foreign aid and poverty reduction is economic growth. I think the Aff is ahead on the spillover argument.
What evidence? What evidence says the internal link between foreign aid and economic production is economic growth? Did they read a card?
So if they link out from the United States, they probably trigger your internal link anyhow. I think the best case from the Neg is probably that most of the impacts about poverty reduction in the developing world are non-meat. I think the worst case is that the Aff is probably narrowly generated because if foreign aid is so unpopular, it would probably eventually offend anyway. I think the Aff's argument is there, but pretty safe.
I mean, look, it's the Neg's fault for not writing this argument better and leaving doubt in a judge's mind, but that's not how I saw the round at all.
So they never really addressed in personal focus, so that's where I go.
I can go next. I think even if I buy that jobs are the most powerful impact, there needs to be some comparative analysis on the Neg case where, maybe not comparative analysis, but I needed to see how your growth in the Aff world would generate the same foreign aid that they have unique benefits on the next side to impact those 900 million people. Yeah.
Oh, please don't post round this judge. Especially when it's the kid that... Anyway, I'm not going to bully a child. But I wouldn't go from the judge that picked you up calling your speeches abhorrent to them being indignant when somebody votes against you and is correct.
I think I was weighing the 900 million people that get out of poverty versus jobs. So maybe that is doing a bit of work to them, but even if you say like 4.7 million jobs are created and you're thinking it structurally over the long term.
Yeah, dude, that was like the least constructive question. That wasn't even like, what could I have done better? It's just like, why is your decision not wrong? Come on. Don't do that.
Yep, I don't have a reason to believe that the apps can access those benefits.
Dude, if Paul gets when Paul gets asked questions like that by high schoolers, oh my god, both of you left child. You were in the clear.
Yeah, the way I saw it was that the growth drives U.S.-specific foreign aid in a world with the UBI. You won't have that. You won't have the foreign aid. So even if you increase it by 1.8% in developing worlds with U.S. growth.
What is this accomplishing? This is gross. Okay, what do you got?
Then we thought it's a very close debate on the cons arguments were sort of more effective in saying that welfare is sort of the best mechanism in order to welfare UBI to sort of help people more poverty. And primarily, I think, sort of from your point, the strongest argument was growth, and they effectively said that, you know, I think their argument in terms of growth was growth for businesses was sort of more persuasive rather than growth for actually helping people more poverty.
Yeah. Not happy with that post rounding. Don't. Whoops. Let's just be clear. Like, don't do that. Like, your biggest asset in debate, to your debate career, is people wanting to help you get better at debate. And you've already lost the round. Like, don't ruin your goodwill with people. Especially if the round's being recorded, dude. Just smile and nod. If you're gonna ask a question, ask what you could have done better, or what you could have done to get their ballot. But don't challenge their decision. Especially when, one, the decision that was in your favor was a stretch, and two, that decision called your debating abhorrent. Like, not the time for you to be indignant. Anyway, that's it for me. Am I a little pixely? What is up with this? I gotta figure out my camera situation a little bit better. Okay, bye.